Hey everybody, today we're going to make a monitor stand with built-in wireless charging. So stay tuned and check it out. So I started off with a piece of walnut that was approximately 4.5 inches wide. Now the overall depth of this monitor stand will be about 8 inches, so I'll need to glue some boards together. I began marking out each piece and then cutting them to length at the miter saw. Initially, I was planning on keeping the live edge part of the wood in the project, but as time went on, I ultimately got rid of it. With all the pieces cut to length, I could begin gluing them together. Obviously, it would have been a little bit easier to glue up 2 long pieces of wood and then cut out the individual pieces, but like I said, I was working around the live edge section of the wood, and with that being the case, it just really wasn't possible. Once the glue had dried, I took the pieces out of the clamps and knocked down any unevenness along the glue line with a small block plane. Then I squared up the ends at the miter saw. With the pieces at their final width, I began making the angled cuts. Now for the first few, I cut 22.5-degree angles on both ends of the top piece and on one end of each of the leg pieces. That way when these joints are glued together, they'll form a 45-degree angle which will splay the legs out nicely. I mocked up the 3 pieces with some tape to check the angles on the joints, and they seem to work out fine. Next I moved on to cutting the angles on the bottom edge of the legs. I tilted the table saw blade to 45 degrees and made these cuts. I took my time and made several cuts, sneaking up on the angle on both legs until they were the exact same length. So I could end this project right here. I could glue these joints together, could sand everything down and apply a coat of finish, and this would be a perfectly usable iMac stand or computer stand in general. But I want to take it one step further. I want to be able to come in and set my phone right there and let it charge. So in order to do that, I picked up a cheap wireless charger and I'm going to mount that on the underside of this and hopefully it works. But one thing I'll have to do is I'll have to remove some of this material so that there's just a thin strip of wood between the charger and my phone. And so we're going to test out how thin that wood has to be right now. So this is just some cheap plywood. It's 3/16 of an inch thick. Let's test this out. I have my doubts. Oh wow, it does. Okay, so 3/16. I'm kind of surprised by that. It did seem a little bit hesitant, like it didn't really take right away. So it's yeah, I don't know. Must somehow it worked that first time, but I think we're gonna have to go a little bit thinner than that. All right, so this next piece of wood is some thin basswood. Apparently it was $2.79. It's 3/32 of an inch thick. So let's try it out. Hey, it worked right away. Seems like it's working. All right, so I like that. Basically, I need to route a circular groove in the bottom of this until I've only got 3/32 of an inch of material left, which might be a little bit nerve-wracking, but we'll see how that goes. With all the angles and that figured out, I flipped the top upside down and traced out the wireless charger. Then I took my trim router and slowly began to remove material until there was about 3/32 of an inch remaining. After that, I decided I wanted to cut in a groove for a small shelf to slide into along the back of the stand. This would be a nice place for my hard drive to sit on and out of the way. Also, since it was along the back side of the stand, unless you're looking at the stand straight on, you won't even know there's a shelf back there. So I threw together this quick sliding router jig and cut an angled groove into each leg. The blue tape is just there to help prevent chip out. With the grooves cut, I milled down a piece of walnut to size for the shelf and test fitted in there. Now for the glue up. I didn't use any clamps for this, I just used tape and it seemed to work just fine. Clamping at angles can be rather challenging and frustrating, so often I just use tape whenever possible. You'd be surprised how well this works. I used a few drops of super glue to bond the pieces right away, as well as some wood glue to provide strength long term. Now on the second joint, to avoid as much glue cleanup as the first joint, I laid down some tape along the edges. I let the glue cure overnight and then cleaned up the inside edges with some sandpaper the next day. Next, I got ready to glue in the back shelf. Nothing fancy here, just glue in the grooves and slide the shelf in. No clamps needed. While that shelf dried in place, I moved on to the top. I can never seem to get my mitered angles perfect, so this is a little trick that I stole from somebody else on the YouTubes. You basically take a screwdriver and rub it along this corner. This bends the wood fibers over just enough to usually hide that hairline gap, but obviously this trick has its limits. Finally, it was on to sanding, and I sanded to 220 grit before applying 2 coats of clear satin wipe-on poly. I love this finish. And to attach the wireless charger, I just used a few globs of hot glue. This way, if I ever need to replace it, it's not going to be difficult at all. I'm really happy with how this project turned out. The hidden wireless charging is a really nice bonus feature, and I like that I have a place for my hard drives up and off the desktop and out of sight. Let me know what you think of this project in the comments down below. Until next time, thanks for watching everybody.